we're talking about boundary bullies, how to handle when we are in a relationship with someone who's extremely toxic, who's pushing our boundaries and just making us feel extremely unsafe. There's a lot of misunderstandings about boundaries. I had a lot of misunderstanding about boundaries when I first got into dealing with them. I thought they should be, first of all, I assumed that they were external to me. I assumed that it was a limit I was setting with somebody else, not a limit that I was setting internally with myself. And I also thought that they were arbitrary, like every person had different boundaries based upon their preferences. Like maybe you're somebody who just would prefer to chit chat about the weather and the latest movie that you watched, and you don't really want to get into something deep. And that maybe I'm a person who really prefers to talk about the latest dream that I had, but that boundaries were individualistic, representative of you, and that kind of like almost like they're elective. But that's actually not what boundaries are. And once I started understanding them better, I got clear, and it started to make so much more sense to me what boundaries actually are. So let's jump into what a boundary really is, what we're really talking about when we're talking about boundaries. I want you to start to think about boundaries in this way. It's actually a psychological boundary between you and another person. It's where you stop and another person begins. It's everything that contains who you are and what matters to you. It's your thoughts, it's how you feel about things, it's your preferences, it's the values that you hold, it's the things that you need, it's everything that consists of you. And when you start to think about boundaries that way, to me, that's a profound shift than the way that I think most of us teach or have learned to experience or think about our boundaries. Because it's not about you controlling another person, that you somehow are limiting their autonomy. It's not about you even trying to, in any way, have power over another person. It's really about protecting and defining yourself. It's about your emotional real estate. So, boundaries actually start when you first realize that you are your own person, that you can do it. You think of the toddlerhood where me do it, I do it. There's this big emphasis on managing their own body, managing their own um, tools like utensils, like feeding themselves or tying their shoes or putting on their coat. There's a sense the child has that this is me and that I'm different than other people around me and that I want control or autonomy over my own life. And that just continues as we move forward. And all of us are in a relation or in a situation in which we were either encouraged and that was applauded and maybe even encouraged to explore, and we were able to be creative and figure out what we liked and who we are and what we are about. Or we may have been in a family system where loyalty was more important, and so that the rules of the family or the rules of that culture were emphasized over maybe your individuality. But I want you to start to think about the fact that we're always in a balancing act between connection with other people, which is sort of merging or becoming a part of somebody else, or we're also at the same time trying to connect with ourselves and be protective of ourselves. So boundaries really are an expression of you. And when someone disrespects a boundary that you hold or have with yourself, what they're essentially saying is that you don't matter, that they're saying that that you don't deserve this respect to honor the things that make up or have to do with you. I want to make sure that TikTok is having. I sometimes forget to put TikTok over on. Yeah, okay, we're on the right Wi-Fi. Sometimes we get on the wrong Wi-Fi, and I end up like, you guys cannot. You get a very, very, very bad connection. So anyway, we're all good across everywhere. So what actually goes wrong with boundaries? Well, I think there's things that go wrong in a different direction. One is in several different directions. One is that we don't understand what boundaries are. And in order to protect ourselves, we start to change our environment. We start to try to change other people. And you know how that goes, because no one has control over another person. And if you're in a relationship with someone toxic, they're going to let you know super quick that you can't manage their life. They're going to show you in all sorts of covert and overt ways that you are a nobody and a nothing, and that they want power over you, not to have you have power over them. And also, we'll also meet certain people who are super sensitive to us having boundaries, and they will be quickly turned off because they're all about using other people as extensions of themselves. And anybody who's been in a toxic relation has experienced this, because you probably have felt like who you were, what mattered to you, what you're about, what your preferences were invisible or got invalidated or experienced a lot of minimization as a result of that. I remember the first Christmas that I had with my toxic ex, and this is when we were still dating. At that time, because I just recently been widowed and my late husband was really good at Christmas gifts, I wanted to do something special for myself. So I decided that I was going to buy myself a really nice camera. And I had placed the order before I went for this visit with him. And while I was there, I got the notice that the company I'd purchased the camera with had canceled it for whatever reason. That wasn't, they weren't able to fulfill the purchase order, and they wanted to let me know that the order wasn't going to happen. And I got that kind of late. It was really close to Christmas, and I was now realizing that I was likely not to have anything under the tree. And for my first Christmas, or second Christmas, it's actually my second Christmas without my late husband, that was really, really painful. And I remember feeling really bummed and telling my then boyfriend that this had happened. And this is what he said. So far, this is just a normal thing. No boundaries are being breached. I'm just sharing something simple. And I said, yeah, my Christmas order for myself just got canceled. So my gift for myself is now not going to be under the tree. And I feel really, really bad about that. And he looked at me and he said, so are you going to let this ruin our day? Are you going to are you going to get over this? So, okay, notice that no one's asking anything of anybody except that I'm just telling information. But my request for information, if you think of John and Julie Gottman's work around emotional bids, was, hey, I want you to care about what's happening. This matters to me. It's hurting my feelings. Can you show concern or compassion for me around something that's really hard? Obviously, you can't fix it because you don't have control like that, but I'm just asking you to connect with me. Now, here's where the boundary, my request, my emotional bid, which is an extension of a request that I was making, all implicitly, it wasn't explicit, it was all implicitly, got then dismissed. He then criticized me, interpreted it as a limitation on our day, as if it was going to ruin our experience together. And then he experienced that as a boundary intrusion, and then shut me down by saying, are you going to let it ruin our day? This is a great example of what often goes wrong between us and other people that ends up being experienced as hurtful. And whether or not we realize it, it's actually a boundary breach, because it's an unconscious, or it's a unspoken and implicit request from one person to another that then gets rejected and rebuffed. So I would love you to be able to see that that's one way that boundaries get affected. That it's not even like I asked for anything. It wasn't like I said to him, hey, stop yelling when we're arguing, or I really don't like it when you do XYZ. It's simply that this was an exchange between two people that went really wrong. But what happened, how it made me feel, was an expression of dismissal and made me feel less than or not important. And this is just one way that bullies co-opt and affect our boundaries. So today, by the way, for those of you who are new to me, I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a clinical psychologist with over 25 years. Yeah, actually, I counted recently, over 25 years of practice experience. And these days, I mostly do abuse awareness, specifically related to narcissistic abuse. And somebody asked, Lori just asked, did I get that camera? Yeah, I was able to reorder it and did get it. So I did have something under the tree that year. No help to him, but I did get something under the tree that year. So I'm so thrilled that you guys are here. I'm here every Tuesday from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, talking about the tough issues that are related to narcissistic abuse, related to narcissism, related to dysfunctional relationships. And I hope you'll join me every week. Next week, we're going to be talking about what happens when you know your relationship is dying. What do you do next? How do you even know that it's going wrong? How do you know that maybe it's failing? So we're going to talk about what to do if you sense the relationship is on its last leg, and what should your next moves be. And I really hope that you turn in. And this week To follow that up, I interviewed Dr. Becky Whetstone. She just wrote a new book called I Think I Want Out. An amazing book, by the way, guys. It's all about defining a marital crisis and what you should do. And you can, by the way, apply this also just to partnership crisis. It doesn't have to be specific to marriage, but she talks about how to know whether or not there's any hope. Some practical questions to ask yourself, what the next steps should be. So if you want to check out the podcast this week, it's on breaking free from narcissistic abuse. She was, I'll tell you, like a fresh of spring air. Dr. Becky had lived in the South for a long time. She's just one of these people with down home, no nonsense, common sense. So if you're really looking for an awesome interview that's just so fresh and different, you got to listen to Dr. Becky. I really enjoyed meeting her and having this conversation. So today, I want to get into boundary bullies. I want to talk about the way in which we experience boundary breaches. I just gave you one about the invalidation of something painful in my life, but let's talk about other types of boundary breaches now that we know what they are. We're also going to get into different types of boundary bullies so that you know, because by the way, they don't all look the same. We end up thinking that we all kind of picture this like malignant narcissist or the covert well, they actually come in a lot of different forms, and not all of them are narcissistic. So let's get into that today. We're also going to talk about their common tactics, and then I'm going to end it today in about a half an hour by taking your questions. So be thinking about what it is that you really want to ask me when I get to the time for your questions. All right, so what are the common types of boundary bullies that what kind of boundary bully experiences are we likely to have? Well, one is they do what's called emotional merging, where they actually co-opt your feelings. They assume they know how you feel, or they tell you how you should feel, or they tell you you should not be that upset. That's actually what I just described. Mine was actually not so much emotional merging, but more co-opting. He was co-opting my experience and then overriding it with how he thought I should respond to something that was happening to me that was very, very painful. In fact, he loved to say to me, "You're not going to make a storm in a teacup, are you?" I just thought, what a ridiculous. By the way, he was really good at making a lot of drama when it came to him, but boy, I was not allowed to be dramatic when it came to me. So watch out for emotional merging or co-opting of your feelings. Here's some examples. You're not really that upset about it, are you? Or please don't be so sensitive. It's a breach because it overrides your emotional reality and teaches you to doubt yourself, or teaches you that you're really not allowed to experience life the way that you're experiencing it. Number two is the invasive questions that get disguised as concerned. These are the people who just dig into your personal life all in the name of they're worried about you or they really want to know you, but they haven't earned the right. They haven't really earned the trust. And you also have this weird gut feeling that it's not so much because they care about you, but just because they like the juicy gossip and the sordid details of morbid issues happening in your life. And you just feel like you're almost like they're telenovela, their soap opera, and that they tuned in to your life to hear what the latest is. So they'll say things like, "Well, but why don't you want kids?" Or, "How much do you make anyway?" Or they'll say, "Why did that go wrong? Tell me what happened with so and so," when you're like, "I don't really want to talk about it." This is a boundary breach because it's asking you to disclose or explain things that really are outside your comfort zone, and you feel kind of put on the spot. You don't want to be rude and you don't want to be accused of hiding things, so you feel like you're kind of compelled to tell them when really it's none of their business. Number three is the unsolicited analysis, or the person who needs to fix everything. So this is the person who kind of psychoanalyzes you without permission. They tend to offer solutions and they always assume the expert role, even when you haven't asked for it, and maybe you're the expert, more of an expert on that topic than you are. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come into my life, and it usually is like new dates, and they'll come in and they'll tell me more about psychology, and I'm thinking, I'm a psychologist with a clinical degree. I'm actually with a PhD in clinical psychology. I've practiced for over 25 years, and you're telling me about psychology. Okay. So it's kind of ironic when I have somebody that I know who's an engineer, and she's a woman, and she says all the time people will come in and try to tell her her job. So it's this unsolicited analysis or fixing. And it's a breach because they're positioning themselves as an authority, and it decenters you, your knowledge, your history, and even your agency. You know who you are as a person. Number 4 is guilt tripping or emotional manipulation. This is when they imply that you're bad or selfish or uncaring because you have a need, or because you said no, or because you asserted some kind of a limit. So they'll say things like, so I guess I know where I stand with you now. Or they'll do things like, after everything I've done for you. So this is, or you're not going to be one of those people, are you? So what happens with this? This is a boundary breach that kind of tries to control your choices by hijacking your emotions. Number 5 is the boundary bait and switch. This is when you express a boundary or a limit, and they initially seem to accept it, but later they'll undermine it or make fun of it or poke jokes at it. They'll sort of like forget about it. They'll kind of like be active, passive aggressive about it. Like maybe, for example, you say, it's important for me to be on time for things. And if I'm going to pick you up, I really need to have you out here so many minutes ahead. And then you drive up and they're not. And then they get in the car and they're like, oh, I forgot. You needed me here by this time. Or they'll say, yeah, you're such a stickler for the time. Or they'll do something that kind of just puts you down or makes you feel bad for you having the choice. And so they'll, even though they acted like it was something they were supportive of and they agreed to, next thing you know, they don't agree to it and they disrespect you over and over by making fun of you or making light of it. This is a breach because it erodes your trust. It teaches you that your limits and your expectations aren't going to be respected, and that puts you on the spot of having to reinforce them over and over and over again. Number 6 is the forced disclosure or oversharing pressure. This is when you feel pushed to have to match someone else's vulnerability even when you're not ready. By the way, watch out for this with toxic people, toxic new partners. This is also a very good love bombing strategy. They'll meet you, and on the first date, they'll start to get into all their childhood trauma and what a bad experience they've had with parents. And then you're thinking, I just thought we would be talking about, I don't know, fun things, flirty things. And now they're unpacking their life story. And you end up thinking, now, if I don't match that, if I don't share my life story too, then maybe I'm withholding, or I'm going to act like I don't trust them, or I end up looking bad because I'm not on the same plane. They're like way oversharing. So this is a breach because it ignores the appropriate level of emotional pacing, and it's disregarding your right to control over the flow and of how you share yourself and when you share it. Number 7 is the enmeshment in the name of love. That's when they collapse boundaries under the guise of wanting closeness. Like, I just feel everything that you feel. Or, we don't need that kind of space from each other because we're soulmates. This is a person who's really, just like the last one was rushed emotional pacing. This is rushed intimacy pacing. This is a person who just is really outpacing the timing of things. And they're not actually, the reason it's a breach is because they're not really respecting your individuality or that your personhood, that you're a separate person. And they're sort of twinning with you, acting like you two are in this together in a way that you really are not. And the last one, number 8, is this is a self breach. This is when you override your own boundaries by ignoring conflicts, by really wanting somebody else's approval, or just because a situation makes you feel uncomfortable. It's when you say yes when you really mean no, or you laugh off something that's hurting, or you pretend to be okay when you're really not. So sometimes we are our own boundary bully by disrespecting ourselves, and that is so important for us to get better at spotting that. Why it matters is because when we breach these types of self-respect, it leads to numbness. It implies to ourselves we don't matter. It's a show that we're prioritizing other people over ourselves. So watch out for that. Okay, so let's talk about the different types of boundary bullies. And notice that I'm slowly, TikTok, you're getting lower and lower on me. So I just raised you back up so you can see me better. Sorry about that. Here are some common types of boundary bullies. The one that we're really used to is the first type, and that is the intimidator. This is the person who controls through force or volume or just sheer intimidation tactics. They're pretty aggressive. They come on hard. They override your no, and they tend to interrupt or escalate or bulldoze you. And when they want your compliance, they consider you going along with things as respect. So they expect you to be obedient and compliant to show respect. So they'll say things like, just, you're being ridiculous. Just do it. Just do it. Or, I don't care what you want. I said we're going. So they'll just blatantly just push through something and disregard your feelings or what's good for you. And when you live with this person for a while, you start to shrink, you start to placate them. You really end up going numb because you're around them. You end up finding it's just easier to go along, so you give up really quickly. It's just too hard to stay on your own feet and be your own person. So, um, yeah, so that's the dominator. That's the number one type. The second type is the expert. This is a person who uses condescension and intellectual superiority as a way to upstage you. They're showing you that they know more, that they somehow are better, and they use analysis, correction, and education as a way to express concern or insight. Man, this one really gets me when I experience it. I think this is the one that upsets me, bothers me the most, because I know it's patronizing. That's how it feels to me. I feel really like put down when they go on this stint, and I've never asked for the education. I'm looking maybe for, I don't know, collaboration or just to talk, and suddenly next thing I know, they know more than I know, and they're going to let me know that they know more than I know. And you'll experience that. They'll say things like, "Let me explain what's really going on," or, "That's not a boundary. You're really talking about avoidance." They have to let you know that they know more. They have a larger vocabulary, or that they're the ones. I'll never forget. This happened to me in the vet cafeteria in college, and I was mortified. I was in a group of people that I didn't know very well, and I was trying to fit in because you guys may be really surprised by this. I don't know. I don't know how I come across, but as a child, I didn't fit in well. It was really hard for me to make friends, and I had better luck at college, but but it wasn't great. And I was trying to like shake off that sense of not doing so well in elementary and middle school. So I was really trying hard my freshman year. So I sat down with some kids that I didn't know, and one of the guys said a word that I didn't know. And I think it was patronizing. I think he used the word Believe it or not, also, my vocabulary has grown a lot over the years, and it didn't used to be that large. I actually had not a very good vocabulary. So I asked him as a way to flatter him. I was fawning. And I said, "So what does that mean?" And he looked at me in front of everybody at the cafeteria over lunch and said, "I would recommend that you go look that up." And I just kind of slunk out of there and stopped talking. And I actually avoided him from then on. So watch out for the expert. They are really good at just putting you down and making you feel idiotic. Number 3 is the martyr. This is a person who controls you through guilt and obligation. They tend to manipulate through their sacrifice, and they use their suffering as a tool and let you know just how often things go wrong or bad for them. And they're actually targeting your empathy. They'll say things like, "I guess I'll just suffer alone again. That's fine." Or, "After all I've done for you and you can't even return a phone call." They'll just really have a way of making you feel bad. And what happens over this is that you start to feel selfish for protecting your time and need, and you end up over functioning for this individual. By the way, a lot of you struggle with this person. A lot of you. I know that because I listen, a lot of you come and talk to me about what's happening in your life, and you end up staying too long because you like, what are they going to do without me? They get in such a dark place, and I just know they said they don't know how they're going to go on if they don't have access to the kids, or they just need me, or whatever. You know how this works, and it ends up, it works. It makes it, like I said, you end up feeling selfish for protecting your time and need, and you end up over functioning for other people. So really watch out for the martyr who's asking you to self-sacrifice. Number 4 is the clinger. This is the emotionally enmeshed person. They're controlling you by dependency and being fused with you. They're not giving you the emotional distance or allowing you to be yourself. They see every time that you say no is a form of rejection, and they guilt you into staying really close. Like they'll say things, "But we're best friends." we're supposed to do everything, or you're supposed to tell me everything. Or if you actually ask for space in some ways, like, hey, I need to check out for the night on the text or something, they'll say, I just guess I must be too much for you. I guess I'm just asking too much. You know what? I'm just going to really give your space. I'm so sorry that I bothered you. And you just end up feeling really bad when they do this. And what happens with this is you start to suppress your need for independence, for solitude. You start to just suppress yourself in general because it's too hard and too difficult. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry this. So consider the lady said, how is my ex every single one of these? I noticed that's a good point. I've got 4 more to go, but if this someone is super good at psychological manipulation, often they'll use more than one of these. They often will use multiple one of these just because they're very, very good strategies. Number 5 is the spy. This is a person who erodes your boundaries through intrusion and by controlling information. They disregard your privacy by checking your phone, looking for secrets, snooping through your photos, and wanting to know who you're talking to. And they assume they have a right to know. My ex used to say, because he was religious, he would say, doesn't the body say that our bodies belong to each other? And so he sort of, it wasn't, I know some people use that in really like sick intimacy ways, but he was talking about like, why should I be allowed any separation from him, any privacy? In fact, most of you know, I think, that I wear wigs. I had a significant hair loss after my 3rd child. And so I lost most of my hair. And these days I wear wigs. And at the time I'd met him, I hadn't gone public with it. I felt really, I'll tell you, as a woman, losing your hair is devastating. Now, I'm not saying those of you, please hear me. This is not a competition for who has had the greatest suffering, because I know there are other things that happen to people that are just as devastating. But I was surprised. I didn't know until I lost my hair how bad it was going to feel. And I actually started having PTSD symptoms. I had nightmares over it. I stopped going out into public. I hated the sun because that meant my scalp would show up easier. It was just super awful, just super awful. So for a long time, I did several different strategies. And finally, after my late husband passed away, I started wearing wigs. But I didn't want anyone to know. I was trying to wear as natural looking hair as I could. I really wanted it to be a secret. And I noticed one time that he'd taken a photo of a previous relationship of this woman sleeping. And that was the one time I didn't wear my wig, was at night. And I said, please don't take a photo of me when I'm sleeping. You know what I found after I got out of that relationship? I found a photo. Yep, he took a photo of me sleeping without my wig on, despite me asking him not do that. So this is a good example of a spy with the boundary erosions, where this lack of privacy. If I was on a phone call, he would say, who is that? What do they want? I actually stopped taking phone calls just because it was just too hard. I couldn't manage the lack of privacy that I had around him. So what happens with this is that you lose your sense of emotional and mental autonomy, and you definitely lose your sense of safety and your privacy. Number 6 is the charmer, or the boundary bypasser. This is a person who violates boundaries by flattering you, being seductive, or being super nice. And they ignore the no by reframing it as misunderstanding, or is this just a joke, or they're being flirtatious. Like, this is a person that kind of cajoles you into things that you really don't want to do. I recently saw a TV show about a girl who didn't want to jump into the water. It was like a big leap off the ledge into the water. And one of the friends said, no, come on, come on. You know you can. You know you should. Come on. See, that's an example of the charmer. They're pushing you to violate boundaries through niceness or seeming like it's in your best interest. But hear me on this. They're not listening to your no. They're not respecting you that you don't want to. There's a difference between you just being hesitant and needing encouragement and asking for that. And by the way, I'm encouraging you guys to do that. If you want someone to encourage you, please tell them. But this is different. This is actually a person who's pushing through that and acting like they know better than you. So really pay attention to the charmer or the boundary bypasser, because they're going to leave you feeling confused and coerced and manipulated. And they'll make you do things that appear consensual, but they're actually not. Then the next one is number 7 is the passive aggressor. This is a person who controls by avoidance, sarcasm, withholding. They punish your boundary setting, your limits, your exercise of you being an individual through silences and moodiness and different kind of covert strategy and sabotage. This is a person, you have something important happening at work, you really want them to be there, and they show up 10 minutes late and miss it when it's your turn to be sort of honored. This is a person who is going to, you say no to spicy time, and next thing you know, this person is not talking to you for a week, or they're acting all moody and depressed on the couch like somehow, the dog died or something. So pay attention to the person who is uses moodiness and silence and all sorts of like silent coercion to get you to do what you want. So they'll say, oh, wow, I guess we're setting the rules now. Or they just give you silent treatment for days because you said no to something. When you're living with somebody like this, you begin to feel like you have to choose between being honest and being safe. So you end up starting to go along just to keep the peace. And number 8, the last one is the flipper. This is a person who turns your boundaries into a betrayal. So every time you tend to assert yourself, they reframe it as you're being cruel, or you're abandoning them, or you're being disloyal, or you're gaslighting them. And somehow that they become the victim because you've set the limit. So they'll say, wow, I guess I never mattered to you. Or, you know what, this is how you treat me? So they end up pushing back on you for setting a limit. And you end up feeling trapped between caretaking them and betraying yourself. So those are the types of the boundary bullies. I'd love to know which one of these your toxic relationship used the most and what it was like for you. So if you thought about putting that in the comments, that would be awesome. I'm going to do one more section, and then we're going to be talking about your problems, whatever they are today. Here's some common strategies that are boundary breaches or boundary bully strategies. One is they gaslight your boundaries. They'll actually gaslight boundaries. They'll say, that's not really a boundary. That's not a really, no one says that kind of boundary. You're just being dramatic. This is where they'll distort, deny, challenge your right to even have a limit. And especially because the limit disrupts their access to you in some way. And it starts to make you wonder if maybe you're being unfair, or maybe you don't know what boundaries really are, or maybe you're being unreasonable. So watch out for the gaslighting of boundaries. Isn't that wild? The number 2 is they reframe assertiveness as selfishness. So when you say, you know what, I'm not available for this, or I really need to check out tonight, then they'll say something like, wow, it must be nice for you to think only about yourself. Or ever since you start therapy, you've become so cold. This is a way that they twist self-advocacy into a moral flaw so that you start to associate anytime you set anything that's respectful towards yourself as being wrong or being mean, and you start to feel guilty for it. Number 3 is they interrogate your reasons. Like you say, I can't come to the party. But why? Why can't you come? Is your mom not letting you come? Or is your husband not letting you out of the house? Or don't you ever get any kind of independent time? Or can't you set limits with your kids? And they'll end up starting to really start to push you on that. Or they'll say, if you say, I'm just not comfortable, they'll say, well, what do you mean you don't feel comfortable? They'll act like your boundary needs defense or justification, as if your no is not enough and like you're on trial. And the goal, you all know what the goal is. The goal is to wear you down or to force compliance just through sheer pressure. Number 4 is playing the victim. You'll do something. You've changed. I miss the old you. I just want to be close like we used to be. That's what my ex used to say. My ex used to say after he got busted for serial cheating and I didn't trust him and there was all sorts of this tension and problems in our relationship, he'd say, I missed the way it was when we first got married. I'm thinking, yeah, dude, I do too. But that was before I knew all of this rest of this stuff. So watch out for this when, you know what, he's not the victim. This is a consequence to you breaking a boundary like, a massive betrayal like that. So watch out for the fact that because you set a limit, that now they have tears and there's this disappointment. Now they're hurt and they'll question that you're being cruel. How many of you guys have seen that video, those videos of the person's found out for having an affair and then they act like their world is broken because the person that they cared about, that they betrayed, now has some sort of consequence to that? Please don't buy this crap of this person is the victim. No, they are not the victim. They did this by their behavior. If they have enough guts to do it and be that cruel and that unkind, then your boundary is completely valid. This is just a very sophisticated form of manipulation. Number 5 is pushing it past pushing past, it's just this once. They'll ask you, can't you just make an exception just this once? Or I promise I'll never ask you to do this again. Please, this will be different. Just don't be so rigid. What they're looking for is they're going to slowly, remember this. If they take an inch on you guys, they're going to take a mile. There is no inch. There is a mile. This is how I think of it. And maybe this is an old-fashioned analogy. Forgive me for those of you who find this offensive, but when I was growing up in the 1960s, a lot of people had outside dogs sort of like as protection. You know, it was the way to help lock up the property because we didn't have a lot of good solid lock systems back then, believe it or not. And it was sort of an open, people kept their doors open. They literally didn't lock their doors at night. They ain't more likely to have a dog on a leash outside. That's just how it kind of was in rural United States. So, but on that dog on that leash, you'd notice that however long that leash was, all the grass and lawn would be worn away because that animal would have done enough pacing to have worn it up. Now, what we often do with these individuals is we will say to them, this is the limit. I want you to live, just imagine the leash. I want you to live within 5 feet of that leash, not all 10 feet. Do you really think the person's not going to take all 10 feet? Of course they are. They're not going to live within that 5 feet. They're going to take all 10 feet. So when they start to chip away at something, if you said no texting after 7 and they start texting at 7:05, please know that within a week or two, it's going to be 8 p.m. and then it's going to be 8:30. And before you know it, you're going to be texting at 10 because you have inadvertently given them more and more leash, and they're going to take more and more of that away until your boundary that you originally set, which is no texting after 7, has been completely annihilated and no longer exists. So watch out for those who are asking you to make exceptions because there is no exception. This is just a new rule that you're agreeing to. Please know that. Number 6 is weaponizing confusion or ambiguity. This is when they act like they didn't know it was a boundary, or they just thought you were joking when you said it. Like, no, they knew that was what you said. That's new. They knew that's what you meant. Like you say to them, I thought we agreed that we're not talking to our exes. And now I see you're having kind of a uncomfortable conversation, at least what I would consider an uncomfortable conversation with your ex. And they'd say, no, we didn't. We just said that we wouldn't. And then they'll they'll move the goalpost down the road a bit. And they're like, but I'm sure that's what we talked about. How could they not understand that that's what I meant when I said that? So watch it because they're going to get you to they'll get you to doubt yourself and the meaning of the boundary, or they'll get you to feel so uptight and like you're being overly sensitive that you just drop it because it's too hard and too frustrating. Number 7 is that they undermine you in front of other people. They'll actually like put you on the spot and make you the butt of the joke. But really what it is, it's a direct communication with you about something they're unhappy about, but they're using the audience as a way to express it. My ex this is weird because do I pack a lot? Not more than any woman, honestly. I'm not a heavy packer, but I'm not a light packer either. So I know there are people in the world who pack less than me, but I think I'm kind of in the middle of the road, honestly. But for whatever reason, maybe one of his exes that he had actually was a heavy packer, but he acted like I was a heavy packer. He had to make it a joke. So you know how she loves to pack, he'd say. I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. It wasn't a trigger for me, so it didn't upset me, but if it was something and maybe it was true for me and I knew it and I didn't care, I was a little sensitive about it, it could really be hurtful when this happens. So watch out for the way they undermine you in front of other people. Like they'll say things like, well, she's the one that gets all the rules here, or he's really into boundaries lately. Watch out. And so what they're actually doing is mocking you or belittling you publicly as a way to discredit you and to apply peer pressure. Number 8, and we have 10 to go, so we've got just a couple more. Number 8 is withholding love or approval. This is when they actually punish you for having a limit on something. They'll give you the silent tone or silent treatment. They'll give a really cold tone, or they'll withhold affection because you somehow did something they don't find very popular. Or they'll do this, and you guys know this. This is what we used to do like, whatever, just do whatever you want. But what you really know is this is anger. This person's upset with you because you are displeased them, and they're now reinforcing that by withholding the connection with you and letting you know that things are only good with you when you're keeping them happy. So watch out for number 8, withholding love or approval. Number 9 is reversing the narrative. This is one where they say, I'm the one being controlling here. Or, you make everything about your comfort. So they end up flipping the script on you so that when you bring up an issue, you end up feeling like you're the one who's being super controlling, and you're accusing you of being so difficult. Like, I know I have to be so sensitive about how I talk to you. And you're like, I just asked you one time to stop doing this one thing. And now I'm hearing I'm sensitive and you have to like think about how to talk to me. This is a really great way of flipping the narrative on you and making you the issue because you set a limit with this person. Number 10 is they leverage your history or trauma. Boy, I hear you guys share this one a lot with me too. So they'll say things like, I know what happened with you before, but I'm not like that other person. Or stop projecting your issues on me. Or, I know that you've had bad experiences in the past, but can you just drop it and let it go here? Because that's not true for me. And this person's actually using what they know about you in the past as a way to control you so that you feel like you can't freely talk about whatever you want to talk about. I know I said we'd be finished here, but I really want to give you some advice about how to halt this. So if you're facing a boundary bully, please, I want you to first clarify boundaries internally. Clarify them internally. What I mean was, know what it is that you're protecting. Know why you're protecting it. Know what you plan to do when it gets breached. Like, say, when this person gets loud and starts to become demeaning, I'm not interested in having a conversation with this person. I know I don't want to do that anymore because it just is disruptive, it's disrespectful, and it feels like a personal attack. So I want you to be really clear on what it is that you want to protect inside yourself. Now, you can state this outside to the other person, but state it in the way in which you're not controlling them. You're not saying, please talk calmer. Please don't use those words. Please don't call me that name. Instead, I want you to flip it and say, you know what? I'm not interested in conversations that get loud like this. Or I don't stick around when people start using names that are disrespectful. I'm not ready to have this conversation, so I'm going to pause it until I'm in a space where I really know what I want to say and I'm clear on what I want to do about this. So really think about what it is, your limit you're going to do for yourself, not about managing this other person. And please avoid phrases like I'm sorry, or I just feel like maybe, or because I'm sorry takes responsibility for it, and you don't need to be sorry for you having a boundary. Your boundary is your boundary, and it's an expression of you. And when I just feel like maybe what you're doing when you say that is you're opening the door for negotiation on that person. Boy, I gotta hear that one because I do that a lot. So really watch out for that. Expect this person to push back. Of course they're going to push back. They're a boundary bully. They're used to being able to escalate things and getting what they want by doing that. But no, because they're escalating it doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It actually means you're doing it right and they're not happy with you. So when you feel that pushback from them, I want you to know that that's actually a sign that they're uncomfortable. And that doesn't mean there's error here. That just means they don't like it. And you don't need to manage their feelings. Their feelings are their problems. Your job is to take care of you. And I want you to, when they start to push or challenge you, just repeat the boundary calmly. Like, I'm not interested in having a conversation when it gets hot like this. And then don't engage in a debate. You don't need to reinstate it or explain why you have it or justify it. Just repeat, don't defend, and don't explain. Number 5 is name the behavior, but don't call out the person. If they escalate or get manipulative or start to guilt trip, you just say, you know what, that feels like a lot like pressure, like I'm being pressured here. Or that sounds an awful lot like guilt tripping. I want you to name the thing, but not name the person. You're not calling them out. You're just saying you're calling out the behavior. That's very different than calling out the person. You're calling out I one time did this with somebody. I said, that sounds an awful lot like gaslighting. And the other person said to me, oh, I don't want to gaslight. I'm really sorry about that. That wasn't what I was trying to do. And the conversation literally shifted into a new direction. So it can be super empowering. Just like, that sounds really unkind. Were you trying to be unkind? Because I don't think that true about you. So but that felt unkind to me. Remember, just hold up the mirror without shaming them. Number 6 is create a consequence and then follow through. And here's another error where a lot of people get it wrong. Do not say out loud a consequence you cannot hold. If you're not prepared to do it or not able to do it, then don't threaten it. Like I used to hear years ago when I was a parent, when they say when to the kids, when I catch you, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. You know what? That parent had no follow through, and that kid knew it, and so the kid then never behaved any better because he knew mom was all talk or dad was all talk. Don't be talk. If you make sure you know exactly what you're going to do and that you have the ability and the opportunity and the means to follow it through. I got pushed so much way back when I was in that toxic relationship, when I just found out that he was betraying me, that the next time I found out he was going to betray me, which, come on, everybody, we all know he was going to do it again, right? Right? Yes. If he had a lifetime of having a secret double life, you think he's going to like immediately stop overnight when he's been very predatory and exploitative? Oh, of course not. I knew he was going to do it again. So basically, what I knew was they were telling me, when you find out he does this again, you need to leave. What they're really telling me is I need to leave. But I had just found out. I really loved the guy at that time. I wasn't ready to leave. And by the way, if you read my story, Love You More, I'm going to frustrate the hell out of you because what you'll hear, you'll see through the entire book. I never once set a consequence that I couldn't carry out. Never. And I wasn't ready to leave until I was ready to leave. And so I never threatened that I was going to leave because I wasn't ready to leave the room. I'm sorry, I wasn't ready to leave, not only leave the room, I wasn't ready to leave him at all. So don't let anyone push you into a consequence you're not ready for, but also yourself. Don't set a consequence just because it sounds bad and you hope it's scary enough, like an ultimatum, that they're going to somehow change. No, they're not going to change. And you're going to look really weak and they're going to know that you're bluffing. And so anything you say after that will be perceived as a massive bluff. So be clear. Like, you know what? This conversation has gotten really uncomfortable. I'm going to leave the room, and then leave the room. Or I'm hanging up, and you hang up the phone. Or I need to pause and stop texting for a while, and stop texting. But make sure that whatever you say you're going to do, you can do it and you have the ability to do it. Your power is in your follow through. Your power, it's not in the consequence, it is in the power of the follow through. So you have to be ready to follow it through. Number 7 is use mental grounding tools when you start to feel really hijacked. I was listening to Esther Perel. I don't know how to say her last name. You guys know who I'm talking about. She was talking about we only have the capacity to listen to something that feels like a personal attack for 10 seconds. She said that's roughly 3 sentences. And then we start to go into fight or flight mode. But we stop listening. When that happens, we stop listening. So these experiences, when people are pushing boundaries, we're going to feel hijacked, we're going to feel dysregulated, and we're going to stop listening. So what you need to do is ground yourself. Take 3 deep belly breaths and say to yourself, I'm allowed to have needs. I'm not doing anyone any harm here. And then I want you just to start to visualize or tune into your body and realize that you are inside yourself. Your feet is on the ground. There's air in the air around you. There's light on your face and heat in the room. I want you to ground into your senses, and I want you to focus on you and what's yours, not on what's going on with them. So when you start to feel hijacked and pushed off and starting to feel all like, shook up, I want you to breathe, calm yourself, ground yourself, get in touch with yourself. And then last, reinforce safety with yourself. Every time you hold a boundary, consider following it with a self-validation, like I'm honoring myself with this. Or to say something like, it's okay that they don't like it. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong for having this boundary. I want you to do this because it strengthens your inner trust and it really helps prevent you from being so vulnerable for future overriding of your limits and boundaries. I'll tell you, as I've gotten better at this, I can feel my self-respect growing. I feel less upset or shaky or doubtful when someone starts to push back on me because I've been really practicing this a lot. It's hard. This is so hard. especially if you've lived in a culture or a home or a society that has really emphasized, if you heard me in the beginning, emphasized loyalty over your individuality. If you've been seen as loyalty as a sign of love, and you going along is a sign of respect, these things are really hard. Especially, I know in that toxic relationship, if I was acting independent, I was described as that was bad, that I was a disrespectful, like a willful wife, and that obviously that I was in, that I wasn't a good wife. So it's really hard when you get those kinds of message that loyalty is more important, but you're not. It's okay that somebody's not happy with you. Here's the thing: just because someone's angry with you does not mean they're going to leave you. It doesn't mean they're going to reject you. All it means is they're not happy with what you just did or said. And it doesn't even mean that you're wrong. It just means they're not happy. That's all that it means. And I actually have to I tell myself I have to tell myself that sometimes. Remind myself this is not the end of the world just because they're not happy. All right, you guys, this has been a really great discussion. So let's take your questions now. I got my glasses on so I can see what you guys are saying. I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. So what is going on in your world that you want to talk about with this? April, I'm so glad you're here, April. Yeah, I'm experiencing all at one point and another, and they're from people who are supposed to be family or friends. Yeah, isn't that wild how family and friends are often the worst violators when it comes to boundaries, that a lot of them are our worst boundary bullies in our lives? That's so common, so true for so many of us. Yeah, so what kind of questions do you have? So Graceful Oaks, I'm so glad you're here, by the way, Graceful Oaks. I told mine I didn't want to talk anymore because he was yelling in front of the kids and called me a bad name. So I said, no more. And he said, so what are you going to do about it? Ooh. And he said this 7 different times. So what are you going to do about that? Yeah, that's a really great example of somebody who's absolutely being disrespectful, and that they kind of like come to the place where they don't see your boundaries as serious, and so as a result they're flagrantly pushing back on you. So here's a question from DA: is there a difference between boundaries and rules? The bully X stated that my boundaries weren't boundaries, they were rules, and therefore unacceptable and asking to be broken. Ooh boy. So yeah, this is a person, by the way, I can just tell by the way it's being framed, that this person sees your boundary as being antagonistic, that you are not allowed to have any sort of self container, be your own person. And, for example, say, DA, that you said, this is true for me, I don't like peas. Yeah, that's a rule for me because I don't like peas. I think they're disgusting. My rule for myself is I'm not eating peas. Now, I imagine with an antagonistic partner, they're going to put peas in everything just because they can and because they want to let me know that I don't matter to them. So I don't, in that case, this is a person who's doing what I would call semantic abuse, where they're mixing the meaning of boundaries as rules, like a non-negotiable rules. And we both know he knew what boundaries really meant. That was really is just a limit, your limit for yourself. He just is being on purpose, fighting. So what I recommend is that you don't engage with it. It's a moot point, and one in which you're not going to win. I wish I had better advice about that because it's really, really tough. And I don't know why this keeps sliding down today. So I just saw a question come in on TikTok. If you're the dominator, how do you stop? Well, I think the good way to stop, if you see yourself in one of these boundary bully types, like you try to just intimidate and control through force, stop interrupting. When you start to recognize what it feels like in your body when you're doing that. Are you feeling afraid? But are you feeling like you're losing control? You just feel like this person's not going to respect you, but get the sense of what that feels like inside yourself, and then catch yourself so that when you start to feel it, actually recognize the signal so that you can stop it when you start to feel the signal. That's the best way to sort of change, because essentially you're looking at this like a bad habit. So you break it the same way that you would break any other bad habit. But great question. So Curly Girl wants to know, how do you handle a spouse who's always saying, I'm the nag and playing the victim constantly? I wouldn't argue with that individual. So if I had a partner who just insisted that everything that I did is a victimization of that person, there isn't really any win on that, because it becomes a fight about what victimization means and who's the biggest victim and who wins that. Nobody wins that. So what I would do is I would ignore it and detach and realize this is a strategy. Because a lot of the strategy, guys, is to stir you up and to create problems with you. So if you then act like it's not a problem and just cease to be upset about it, you disempower it in a really powerful way. Um, I found out that when I started ignoring a lot of what was being said or done around me, it just caused it to be a non-thing. It really de-escalated it very significantly. So Lori wants to know, what are some of my favorite healthy coping strategies? Can you say more what you mean? Like coping for what? Coping when I'm feeling like someone's pushing my boundary? One of them is for me to recognize I always have the power to say no and that I don't need to please anybody but myself. And that when that feels uncomfortable, because it does feel uncomfortable, I remind myself that's okay because everybody's allowed to do that. And that toxic people are really good at doing that. And I don't even think of calling them out for that, because I give them that leeway. So why should I not be allowed to have the same leeway for myself? Yeah, when I'm pushed, how do I regulate? Yeah, I breathe. And I have a lot of, one of my strong suits is self-awareness. I have a big conversation going on in my head all the time. So I lean into that a lot and talk to myself through it. I deconstruct stuff, rephrase things, twist it in the opposite direction. A really good strategy, if you're questioning whether or not what you're asking is reasonable, ask yourself, if a friend did this, would it be okay for them? If somebody you dearly love set this limit, how would you feel about that? And if it's for a good friend that you dearly love, then it's good for you. There's nothing wrong with it. Again, what happens is toxic people don't like losing their access to us. That's really what this is about. They don't like losing their access to us, and this is all a big pushback. Okay, so my financial advisor is helping me get out of my narc's financial abuse, and he seems to be a narc trying to groom me after yesterday's meeting. Do I have to run, or can I call it out? You know what I would consider doing? I would consider saying, that call made me a little uncomfortable and it sounded like you were trying to get a little flirty. Now, I know you as a professional, you wouldn't do that, right? I would do something like that. That, by the way, comes out of, I don't know if you guys have watched Jefferson Fisher's work. Jefferson Fisher is I think I'm saying his name right. If I'm not, someone please correct me. I'm sure somebody here knows who I'm talking about. He's an attorney who has a big YouTube account and TikTok account. He gives good strategies on how to call people out in a gentle way that really puts them on a spot and tends to shut stuff like that down. So that's what I would recommend that you do. What you're going to do is it will make this person uncomfortable enough that they'll probably pull their act together, or they will attack you. And if they attack you for calling them out, then that was bad and that you need to get out of that relationship. So it's really kind of a test. Can this person catch themselves and pull themselves back? Or if not, then you need to just get out of the situation. All right, I'm realizing we're coming up on the time. So let me take two more questions. One is Jane says, my husband believes boundaries within marriage are sinful because we're one flesh. But over time, I could see that the we was just really he, and it was becoming a form of idolatry. Yeah. Really watch out for that kind of use of spiritual language. It's almost like it's a form of spiritual bypassing. This is a form of manipulation masquerading as religiosity. There is nothing spiritual about that. And if you even look at the Bible, you don't see Christ, the Holy Spirit, or God merging like that. They were never disrespectful to each other. So again, and the question then, do you call it out when it's happening in that kind of experience? No, typically people like that, they use a lot of semantic abuse, and they're going to outrun you with the twisting of what's said to where eventually you just feel exhausted and you want to give up. So yeah, it is. It's a form of spiritual abuse, definitely. In that situation, Jane, I would say note to self, this is not a safe person. And I would begin to look at what I'm going to do to protect myself in this relationship, because there's not safety with this individual. Yeah, I agree with you, Sherry. Saying no to some people turns them into raging monsters, and it is not always safe. So that is a great point to end on today. Please, please, everybody know this, that boundaries with some people is like waving a red flag in front of the bull, and they will charge it. And the person that you have to know, the person you're around, when they charge, what is that going to mean? Is it mean just that they're going to, like in Jane's case, get more sophisticated and make it harder and twist it further and make you feel exhausted and confused? Or is it going to become dangerous? You really, really have to know this person and know whether or not you're putting yourself at risk. There were some times on some things I knew that I needed to keep my mouth shut because I knew that my ex was dangerous. I knew he was capable of violence and I was not going to threaten him in that way. So always know where that line is and stay on the other side of that line. And if you'd like a good book that will help you identify that line or think it through in a little better way, please check out Gavin DeBecker's book, The Gift of Fear. That's an amazing way. By the way, I don't know if you guys may have seen it being talked about on a couple spots, but I have one spot left for the summer relationship reset. We start next Tuesday, next week. If you sign before tomorrow, you get a free half an hour one-on-one with me. We're going to work for women. There's one spot left. We're going to work for 6 weeks on your top relationship or self issue. It's going to be like workshopping with just a small group of women where every week we get to update each other, talk about what our biggest challenge has been, talk about what's getting our biggest obstacles, set new goals, and then come back and work again on those goals. We're going to have a WhatsApp group so we can talk in between sessions. I'm going to be sending reflective questions for each of you so that you can also really be honing in on your specific topic so that you get success. So if you're looking for help and you want to kind of reset your summer, this is a great way to start your summer off. Please consider working with me. There is one spot left for the summer reset, relationship reset. And how you can get to it is Kerry McAvoy, PhD, /reset. /reset. All right, you guys, this has been wonderful hanging out with you. We'll be back next week talking about what to do if you think your relationship is on its last leg. What do you do next? So we're going to be talking about relationships that are deeply, deeply in trouble and how to handle that when that's happening. All right, I think this is wonderful. I so appreciate you guys today. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I will see you next week.